bedroom window of Eleanor Foster's modest quarters above the Mercantile, carrying with it the familiar sounds of Clearwater Springs, laughter from the saloon down the street, the distant piano playing a jaunty tune, and the occasional clop of horses' hooves against packed dirt. 6 months had passed since she'd arrived in this remote Colorado town, and though the newness had worn off, she still felt like an outsider. Eleanor sighed, setting aside the ledger she'd been working on. Numbers swam before her tired eyes as she stood and stretched her cramped muscles. Running her father's store after his passing had proven more challenging than she'd anticipated. At 24, she'd expected to be married with children by now, not managing inventory and haggling with suppliers. A sharp knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "Miss Foster, it's Sheriff Reed. May I have a word?" Eleanor quickly smoothed her skirts and tucked a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "Just a moment," she called, lighting an additional lamp before opening the door. Daniel Reed stood in the hallway, his tall frame nearly filling the doorway. In the glow of the lamp, his features seemed more severe than usual. Strong jaw tightened, blue eyes narrowed with concern beneath the brim of his hat, which he promptly removed. "Sheriff," she greeted him with a nod. "Is something the matter?" "No trouble, ma'am, but I need to discuss something with you. May I come in?" Eleanor hesitated only briefly. A lady entertaining a man alone in her quarters would certainly fuel the town gossip mill, but Daniel Reed was the sheriff, and his serious expression suggested official business. Of course. She stepped aside, gesturing to the simple wooden chair by her small table. "Please." The sheriff entered, his presence making her modest quarters feel suddenly cramped. He declined the seat she offered, instead standing with his hat in his hands. "Miss Foster, I've received word that Julian Thompson is returning to Clearwater Springs." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. She gripped the back of the chair to steady herself. "When?" His business partner telegraphed ahead. "Thompson's train arrives tomorrow afternoon." Tomorrow. The word echoed in her mind like a gunshot. Julian Thompson, the man who'd swindled her father out of his life savings just months before his death. The man whose smooth words and false promises had left them nearly destitute. The man she'd once foolishly believed herself in love with. "I thought you should know," Daniel continued, watching her carefully, "given your history." Eleanor stiffened. "What exactly do you know of my history with Mr. Thompson?" "Only what your father told me before he passed, that Thompson cheated him in a business deal, and that you were acquainted." "We were more than acquainted," Eleanor admitted, surprising herself with her candor. "We were engaged to be married. Until I discovered his true character." Daniel's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "If you do, I prefer to keep it that way." She squared her shoulders. "Thank you for the warning, Sheriff. Is that all?" "Not quite." He shifted, his large hands turning his hat brim. "Thompson is coming with plans to invest in the new railroad spur. He'll be meeting with several business owners. I'd wager he'll approach you about the Mercantile. He's wasting his time if he thinks I'd sell to him." "Be that as it may, he'll be in town for at least a week." Daniel's gaze met hers steadily. "If he causes you any trouble, any at all, you come to me directly." The intensity in his eyes caught her off guard. In the 6 months since she'd met Sheriff Reed, he'd always been polite but distant, their interactions limited to brief exchanges when he stopped by the store for supplies or nodded to her on the boardwalk. This protective concern was unexpected. "I appreciate your concern, Sheriff, but I can handle Julian Thompson." A flicker of something, admiration perhaps, crossed his face. "I don't doubt that, Miss Foster. You've proven yourself quite capable since taking over the store. Still, my offer stands." After he left, Eleanor sank into her chair, her mind racing. Julian returning to Clearwater Springs was her worst nightmare realized. The small town had become her sanctuary, a place where she could rebuild her life away from the whispers and pitying glances that had followed her in Boston after the scandal. Now her past was arriving on tomorrow's train. Daniel Reed left Eleanor Foster's quarters with a troubled mind. He'd watched her these past months, admiring from a distance the way she'd taken hold of her father's failing business and turned it around through sheer determination. The townsfolk had been skeptical at first. A woman running a business alone was unusual enough, but Eleanor had won them over with her fair prices, honest dealings, and unfailing politeness. What he hadn't told her was that Julian Thompson had specifically inquired about her in his telegraph. The man knew exactly where Eleanor had gone after leaving Boston, which suggested he had deliberately tracked her down. That didn't sit well with Daniel. He walked the darkened streets of Clearwater Springs, completing his nightly rounds more from habit than necessity. It was a peaceful town most nights, occasionally disrupted by drunken cowboys or prospectors down from the hills, but nothing he couldn't handle. He'd come west seeking this quiet life after years of chasing outlaws across Arizona and New Mexico territories. At 34, Daniel had seen enough violence to last several lifetimes. The badge he wore in Clearwater Springs represented something different, not just law but order, civility. A chance to protect people before they needed rescuing. People like Eleanor Foster. He couldn't pinpoint exactly when his professional interest in the town's newest business owner had developed into something more personal. Perhaps it was the way she carried herself with quiet dignity, despite the challenges she faced. Or maybe it was the rare moments when she truly smiled, not the polite curve of lips she offered customers, but the genuine expression that transformed her entire face and revealed dimples in her cheeks. Whatever it was, Daniel found himself increasingly drawn to her, though he'd done nothing about it. A woman like Eleanor Foster, educated, refined, wouldn't look twice at a former bounty hunter turned small-town sheriff. But Thompson's imminent arrival changed things. Daniel knew men like him, smooth-talking confidence men who left destruction in their wake. Old protective instincts stirred within him. As he approached the jail, a movement across the street caught his eye. A figure slipped between buildings, moving with suspicious care. Daniel's hand instinctively went to his sidearm as he changed direction to investigate. The next morning dawned clear and bright, but Eleanor hardly noticed the perfect blue Colorado sky as she prepared to open the mercantile. She'd slept poorly, her dreams haunted by Julian's handsome face and deceiving smile. The bell above the door jangled as her first customer entered, Mrs. Bailey, the doctor's wife, coming for her weekly supplies. "Good morning, Miss Foster." Mrs. Bailey smiled warmly. "You look a bit peaked today. Are you feeling well?" "Just a restless night," Eleanor replied, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. "What can I help you with?" As she measured flour and sugar for Miss Bailey, the door opened again. Sheriff Reed entered, removing his hat as he stepped inside. Eleanor noticed immediately that something was different about him. A purple bruise colored his left cheekbone, and he moved with a slight stiffness. "Sheriff, what happened to you?" Mrs. Bailey exclaimed before Eleanor could speak. "Nothing serious, ma'am," he replied. "Just had to deal with a trespasser last night." Mrs. Bailey clucked sympathetically, but seemed more intrigued than concerned. "Not often we have excitement in Clearwater Springs. Who was it?" "A stranger passing through. He's cooling his heels in my jail now." Daniel's eyes met Eleanor's briefly. "Actually, Miss Foster, I was hoping to speak with you about it when you have a moment." Eleanor's heart quickened. "Of course, Mrs. Bailey, will there be anything else?" After Mrs. Bailey left with her purchases, Eleanor turned to Daniel with concern. "Sheriff, your face." He waved off her concern. "It looks worse than it is." This trespasser was he. "Not Thompson, if that's what you're asking. Just a drifter I caught trying to break into the back of your store." Eleanor gasped. "My store? Why?" "That's what I'd like to know. He won't say much, but he had this on him." Daniel reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded paper. "It's a detailed drawing of your storeroom layout, including where you keep your safe." Eleanor took the paper with trembling fingers. The diagram was indeed accurate, disturbingly so. "Someone's been watching you, Miss Foster. Someone who knows your routines." "But who would?" She stopped, realization dawning. "Julian." Daniel nodded grimly. "That would be my guess. The man in my jail isn't Thompson, doesn't match the description your father gave me, but he could be working for him." "But why?" "The safe contains only the day's earnings. I deposit most funds in the bank weekly." "Perhaps Thompson doesn't know that. Or perhaps," Daniel hesitated. "What?" "Perhaps he's trying to frighten you, make you feel vulnerable before he arrives." Eleanor's jaw clenched. If that's his intention, he'll be sorely disappointed. A hint of a smile touched Daniel's lips. "I thought you might say that." He grew serious again. "Still, I'd feel better if you weren't alone here, at least until we know what Thompson is planning." "I can't afford to hire help, Sheriff." "I wasn't suggesting hired help." He shifted, and Eleanor was surprised to see a hint of uncertainty in the usually composed sheriff. "I was thinking I could spend more time around the mercantile. Make my rounds more frequently in this area." The offer touched her. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to disrupt your duties." "Keeping the town safe is my duty, Miss Foster." His blue eyes held hers. "And that includes you." The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. For the first time, Eleanor looked at Daniel Reed not as the town sheriff, but as a man, a handsome, honorable man who was offering her his protection. "Thank you," she said softly. The moment was broken by the distant sound of the train whistle. They both tensed. "That'll be the noon train from Denver?" Daniel said unnecessarily. Eleanor nodded, her stomach nodding. "He's here." Julian Thompson stepped off the train with the same elegant confidence Eleanor remembered. His tailored suit and gold watch chain marked him as a man of means, and his smile charmed the stationmaster immediately. He looked exactly as she remembered, handsome in a polished way, with perfectly coiffed dark hair and calculating eyes that missed nothing. Eleanor watched from the shadowed interior of the Mercantile, her heart pounding. She'd closed the store briefly, needing these moments alone to gather her courage. Julian surveyed the town, his gaze eventually landing on the Mercantile sign. Foster and Company. His smile widened, and Eleanor felt a chill despite the warm spring day. He knew she was here. Rather than approach the store, however, Julian collected his luggage and headed toward the hotel. Eleanor released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The confrontation was postponed, at least for now. The afternoon passed in tense anticipation, but Julian didn't appear. By closing time, Eleanor's nerves were frayed from jumping every time the bell above the door rang. As she was counting the day's earnings, a knock came at the front door. Through the glass, she could see Daniel. Relief washed through her as she let him in. "Any sign of him?" she asked, locking the door behind him. "He's been meeting with various business owners all afternoon," Daniel replied. "Had dinner with the banker and the mayor at the hotel restaurant. But he hasn't come here." "Not yet?" Daniel studied her face. "Are you all right?" "I will be better when Julian Thompson is on the next train out of Clearwater Springs," she admitted. "This waiting is," she gestured helplessly. "I understand." And somehow, looking into his steady blue eyes, Eleanor believed he truly did. "I came to escort you home, if you'll allow it." The offer was both proper and thoughtful. "Thank you, Sheriff. I'd appreciate that." As they walked toward her quarters, Daniel kept a respectful distance, but his presence beside her was reassuring. The setting sun cast long shadows across the street, and the evening air carried the scent of pines from the surrounding mountains. "You know," Daniel said conversationally, "when I first came to Clearwater Springs 3 years ago, this was little more than a mining camp with aspirations. Hard to believe how much it's grown." Eleanor welcomed the mundane topic. "My father wrote that it showed promise. That's why he invested in the Mercantile." He was right. With the railroad spur coming through, Clearwater will likely double in size within a year. "Which is precisely why Julian is here," Eleanor said. "He always could smell opportunity." Daniel glanced at her. "Your father mentioned Thompson cost him a great deal of money." Eleanor nodded, the painful memories surfacing. "Julian convinced my father to invest everything in a shipping venture. The company didn't exist, it was just a scheme to collect investors' money. By the time we discovered the truth, our savings were gone and Julian had disappeared." "And your engagement?" "Ended the moment I learned what he'd done. Though in truth, Julian had already moved on to his next target, a wealthy widow in New York." Eleanor's voice hardened. "He never loved me. I was simply his way into Boston society, where he could meet potential victims." They reached the staircase leading to her quarters above the Mercantile. Daniel stopped at the bottom step. "I'm sorry for what he did to you and your father," he said quietly. "It was a difficult lesson, but perhaps a necessary one. I learned to be more cautious with both my heart and my trust. Some men are worthy of trust, Miss Foster." Daniel's voice was low, his eyes holding hers. "I'm beginning to believe that," she replied softly. For a moment they stood in silence, something unspoken passing between them. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "I'll wait until you're safely inside." "Thank you, Sheriff." She hesitated. "Daniel." His name felt intimate on her lips. He nodded once, a small smile touching his mouth. "Eleanor." She climbed the stairs, aware of his watchful presence below. At her door she turned and raised a hand in farewell. He tipped his hat, then turned to continue his evening rounds. For the first time since hearing of Julian's impending arrival, Eleanor felt a measure of peace. The bell above the mercantile door jangled the next morning, and Eleanor looked up from arranging a display of canned goods. Her heart stuttered in her chest. Julian Thompson stood in the doorway, as impeccably dressed as ever, a smooth smile on his handsome face. "Eleanor," he said warmly, as if they were old friends, "how wonderful to see you again." She straightened, grateful that no other customers were present. "Mr. Thompson, what can I help you with?" He stepped further into the store. "So formal, my dear. After all we meant to each other?" "We meant nothing to each other," she replied evenly. "You made that perfectly clear when you stole my father's life savings and disappeared." Julian had the audacity to look wounded. "Business setbacks happen to the best of us, Eleanor. Surely you don't still blame me for an investment that simply didn't pan out?" "An investment in a company that never existed." Her voice remained steady, though anger coursed through her. "You're a thief and a liar, Julian. Now state your business or leave my store." His smile faded. "Very well. I've come to make amends. Actually, I've been quite successful these past few years, and I'd like to repay what your father lost with interest." Eleanor stared at him, disbelieving. "Why?" "Perhaps I've developed a conscience." When she scoffed, he spread his hands. "Or perhaps I simply recognize a good business opportunity when I see it. Clearwater Springs is poised for significant growth. Your mercantile is well positioned to profit from that growth, with the right investment. You want to buy into my business." "I want to buy it outright," he corrected. "For a very generous sum that would allow you to return to Boston in comfort." "I have no desire to return to Boston." Julian studied her, his calculating eyes taking in every detail of her appearance. "No? What keeps you in this rustic setting?" "Certainly not the cultural opportunities." His gaze sharpened. "Or is it someone rather than something that holds your interest?" Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. "My reasons for staying are no concern of yours." "My answer is no. The mercantile is not for sale." "Everyone has a price, Eleanor." Julian moved closer, and she caught a whiff of his expensive cologne. "Name yours." "Get out. Don't be hasty. Think of what you could do with." "I believe the lady asked you to leave." Sheriff Reed stood in the doorway, his stance deceptively casual though his hand rested near his holstered gun. Julian turned, his expression briefly showing annoyance before smoothing into polite inquiry. "Sheriff, is it?" "I'm simply having a business discussion with Miss Foster." "It didn't sound like business to me," Daniel replied. "It sounded like harassment." "A misunderstanding, I assure you." Julian's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Eleanor and I are old acquaintances." "Miss Foster," Daniel corrected him. Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. Miss Foster." He turned back to Eleanor. "Consider my offer. I'll call again tomorrow for your answer." After he left, Daniel approached the counter. "Are you all right?" Eleanor released a shaky breath. "Yes, thank you for intervening. I meant what I said yesterday about keeping a closer eye on the mercantile." His expression was grim. "I don't trust that man." "Nor should you," Eleanor agreed. "Julian never accepts defeat gracefully. He'll be back." "I'll be ready when he is." The steel in Daniel's voice was reassuring. "In the meantime, I've arranged for Deputy Collins to keep watch tonight." "That's not necessary." "The man in my jail finally started talking," Daniel interrupted. "He was hired to break into your store and steal certain documents from your safe." Eleanor frowned. "What documents?" "He wasn't told specifics, just that they were papers Thompson wants very badly." She thought for a moment, then her eyes widened. "My father's journal. He kept detailed records of all his business dealings, including Julian's fraud. I brought it with me from Boston." "That would explain Thompson's urgency," Daniel said. "Those journal entries could implicate him in numerous crimes." "The journal is evidence," Eleanor realized, "if other victims came forward. Thompson could face serious charges." Daniel looked at her intently. "Where is it now?" "In my personal quarters. I never kept it in the store safe." Relief crossed his features. "Good. But it still needs better protection. Would you allow me to place it in the jail safe for now?" She nodded. "I'll bring it to you this evening." A comfortable silence fell between them. Eleanor found herself noticing the way sunlight from the window caught in Daniel's light brown hair, giving it golden highlights. When he smiled, the corners of his eyes squinted in a way that made her heart beat faster. "Sheriff," she began hesitantly, "I never properly thanked you for your help with all this." "No thanks necessary. It's my job to protect the citizens of Clearwater Springs." "Is that all it is? Your job?" The boldness of her question surprised even her. Daniel's eyes softened. "No, Eleanor, not when it comes to you." The simple admission hung in the air between them, full of possibility. Over the next few days, Julian made repeated attempts to persuade Eleanor to sell the mercantile, each offer more generous than the last. She refused each time, growing more confident with every rejection. Daniel was often nearby during these encounters, his presence a silent support that she came to rely on. In the evenings he escorted her home, their conversations ranging from books they'd read to their hopes for the future. Eleanor found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone, her dreams of expanding the mercantile to include a lending library, her secret enjoyment of dime novels, her fear that she might never find someone to share her life with. Daniel, in turn, spoke of his years tracking outlaws, his decision to settle in Clearwater Springs, and his desire to build something lasting in the growing town. He never pressed for more than she was willing to give, but Eleanor sensed his feelings mirrored her own growing attachment. On the 5th day after Julian's arrival, everything changed. Eleanor was closing the store when Julian appeared, his usual polish somewhat diminished. His eyes held a desperate gleam that put her immediately on guard. "One final offer," he announced without preamble. "Triple what the mercantile is worth." "The answer remains no," she replied firmly. Julian's facade cracked. "You're making a grave mistake. I know about the journal, Eleanor. Your father's detailed account of our business dealings." "You mean his detailed account of your fraud?" "A matter of perspective," he snapped. "That journal could cause me considerable inconvenience. I want it." "It's not for sale either." His expression hardened. "Everything is negotiable. Everyone has their price." "Not everyone," came Daniel's voice from the doorway. Julian spun around, his hand moving toward his coat pocket. Daniel was faster, his gun drawn in one smooth motion. "I wouldn't," the sheriff warned quietly. Julian froze, then slowly raised his hands. "This is a misunderstanding, Sheriff. I was merely reaching for my handkerchief." "Is that what you call your revolver these days?" Daniel nodded toward the visible outline in Julian's pocket. "Take it out. 2 fingers only. Drop it on the floor." With clear reluctance, Julian complied. The gun clattered to the wooden floorboards. "Julian Thompson, you're under arrest for attempted assault and conspiracy to commit burglary." Daniel moved forward, handcuffs ready. "Your hired man told us everything." "You have no proof of any conspiracy," Julian blustered as Daniel secured his wrists. "But we do," Eleanor said. "My father's journal documents your fraudulent company in detail, including the names of other victims. I've telegraphed several of them. They're more than willing to testify against you." Julian's face contorted with rage. "You vindictive." "I'd choose my next words very carefully if I were you," Daniel interrupted coldly. Julian fell silent, seething. "I'm taking him to jail," Daniel told Eleanor. "The U.S. Marshal will collect him next week. He'll stand trial in Denver." "You'll regret this," Julian hissed as Daniel led him toward the door. "Both of you." Eleanor watched them go, a strange mixture of emotions swirling within her. Relief that Julian would finally face consequences for his actions, pride in her own strength for standing against him, and something else, something warm that bloomed in her chest whenever she looked at Daniel Reed. The evening air was cool as Eleanor made her way to the jail. Julian had been transported to Denver that morning, escorted by Deputy Collins and 2 U.S. Marshals. The town was already buzzing with gossip about his arrest and the crimes he'd allegedly committed. She found Daniel at his desk, completing paperwork. He looked up when she entered, his face lighting with a smile that made her heart skip. "I heard Julian is on his way to Denver," she said. With enough evidence to put him away for years, Daniel confirmed, setting down his pen and rising to greet her. "Your father's journal was the key. Several of his other victims have come forward. I'm glad. Not just for myself and my father, but for all the others he deceived." She moved closer to his desk. "I wanted to thank you for everything. I was just doing." "If you say just doing my job one more time, Sheriff Reed, I may have to take drastic action." His eyebrows rose in amusement. What sort of drastic action did you have in mind, Miss Foster? Eleanor gathered her courage. The sort that might involve me telling you that these past few days have meant more to me than I can say. That your kindness and protection have touched my heart in ways I never expected. Daniel's expression softened. He moved around the desk until he stood before her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. Eleanor, he said softly, nothing about what I feel for you is just anything. It's everything. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. The connection sent warmth spreading through her. I know we haven't known each other long, he continued, at least not like this. But I feel as though I've been waiting to meet you my entire life. Daniel, she whispered, her free hand reaching up to touch his face. He covered her hand with his own, turning to press a gentle kiss against her palm. The tender gesture brought tears to her eyes. I can't offer you much, he said. Just a small house on the edge of town, a steady income, and my word that I'll spend every day trying to make you happy. Eleanor's heart soared. Are you asking me to marry you, Sheriff Reed? I suppose I am, Miss Foster. His smile was both nervous and hopeful. I know it's sudden, but... She silenced him with a finger against his lips. It's not too sudden when it's right. Daniel's eyes searched hers. Is it right? In answer, Eleanor rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as Daniel's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. I'll take that as a yes? Eleanor laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. Yes, Daniel Reed. That's most definitely a yes. Outside the jailhouse window, the first stars appeared in the darkening Colorado sky. In Clearwater Springs, a frontier town on the cusp of growth and change, two people who had found each other against all odds held tightly to their newfound love, and to the promise of all the tomorrows stretching before them.